Hi all! Today we'll be looking at how to use Google Forms to set up our studies. First, for the purposes of our studies, you and your group will need to set up your questions. If you're doing a correlational study, you'll need 2 questionnaires, each with a minimum of 5 questions. If you're running an experimental study, you need only 1 questionnaire, this time with 10 questions. Before getting into Google Forms, take some time to work with your group to figure out the questions you want to ask. You may take questions from prior studies also. For instance, if you're working on a study related to self-esteem, you might want to use something like the Rosenberg Self-Esteem Scale. This is the scale that I will be using to demonstrate setting up a questionnaire. To help you follow along, you can also access this questionnaire on the lab page for this week. Generally, I would suggest you use something like Likert type questions. That means use questions that can be responded to on a 1 to 5 scale, or something similar. Once you've figured out your questions, or once you've figured out which questionnaires you're using from other sources, log into the class account. You can find the class account information on this week's lab page on Canvas. For the purpose of this demonstration, I'm currently logged into the account that I have set up for Citrus College. First, search online for Google Forms. Once you've gotten into Google Forms, make sure that you're logged in with the class account. You should see a form called Research Methods Shell. If you don't get to this page, click at the top left so that way you can get to this landing page. This shell contains generic informed consent form, a demographic questionnaire, a space for the questions that you will put in, and finally a debriefing form. Start by clicking into the Research Methods shell. At the top right of the screen, you will see 3 dots stacked on top of each other. Click here and then Make a Copy. Name the copy with your group members' last names, the semester, and the year. For instance, this demonstration copy will be named Graham Fall 2020. Then hit OK. Your copy should appear in a new tab. Make sure not to alter the original and then close out that first tab. You should be left with only your copy up. Once you have your copy, take a look at the first section, the informed consent. In the informed consent, there is a blank space. Here, you will give a brief, general explanation of your study. While we don't want to be so vague as to not let participants know what they're doing, we also don't want to be overly specific here either, so as to avoid priming potential research subjects. Fill this blank and then move down. The demographic questionnaire is already filled out. We will be reporting on the information we get from here later. For now, keep moving down. The research questionnaire section is where we'll be doing most of the work this week. First, click the header for this section. Then, look for a plus sign in a circle so that we can add our first question. The default for Google Forms should be a multiple choice question. This space at the top is for the question text. As I'm using the Rosenberg Self-Esteem Scale, the first statement will be, on the whole, I am satisfied with myself. Because this survey has a 0 to 3, strongly disagree to strongly agree scale, I will then enter those options below. Your questions and statements may differ in the number of responses that you are putting in. Just make sure that all of the answer options are entered in. Then, hit the plus button to add your second question or statement. Your statements and questions should be using a consistent response type, so you may also instead want to press the duplicate button at the bottom of the question. Then all you will need to do is change the question text. For clarity, you may also want to change the multiple choice format to a linear scale. Here, as I've entered the second question for the Rosenberg Self-Esteem Scale as an example, using this format, you'll need to enter the score for the lower end of your scale as well as the score for your high end of the scale. This will become a 0. This will become a 3. Our 0 label becomes strongly disagree, and our 3 label becomes strongly agree. This is a good time to bring up the directionality of your questions and statements. Notice on the Rosenberg Self-Esteem Scale, some items have an asterisk next to them. These asterisks indicate reverse coding. This will come into play more when we do our data cleaning and analysis. For now, though, I suggest that you keep your scale consistent. In this example, that means strongly disagree is always the low end, and strongly agree is always the high end. Once you've gotten all of your questions in, move down to the final section, debriefing. Here, you will see another blank. Fill this blank in with a more thorough explanation of your study's focus. This section is meant to let participants know that they are finished with the study, and also lets them know what the study was really about. Again, the blank space in the informed consent should give them a little bit of information, but not enough as to let them guess what the hypothesis of the study is. Here, we can let them know more specifically. Once you are done, you can and should preview your questionnaire. Click the eye at the top of the page to go through a preview. This preview will show you what your participants see. Notice that I have two question formats in this research questionnaire portion. Do not do this. Instead, make sure that your questions are all done the same way. The two formats shown here are merely so you can see what they look like. Once you're done, you can either click through all the way, or you can simply close this out. If you're satisfied with how your study is looking, the last thing we'll do is click the purple Send button at the top. Here, click on the Chain Link button to get a link for your study. This is what you will submit for this week's lab. You can shorten the link if you want. Just make sure to get this in so that I can check your study this coming weekend. This concludes the Google Forms tutorial. If you have any questions, make sure to make it to either of the live sessions or message me via Canvas.